right, so in writing, we have written our rough draft, our first draft, I guess you could call it. But authors always work to improve their work, which is what we're going to be working on doing, is making our writing better. Think about even professional authors, of books that you are reading or books you have read. They are always looking for ways to become a better writer themselves. Even though they're already really good, they always think, I can always be a better writer. And the best way to become a better writer is to ask for feedback. Do you know what feedback is? Connor?
It means to ask people for information.
Right. Asking people what they think about what it is that you have written. You can look at the feedback or suggestions that people give you. Do you have to take every suggestion that somebody gives you? No, but they might have a better idea that you weren't even thinking of that you could possibly include in your story. When people give you feedback, do you think professional writers get upset with those other people? No, because they can either use that feedback or not use that feedback, but they don't get upset about that. It doesn't mean that they have become a bad writer. Somebody else just might be looking at it a little bit differently than how they were looking at it. So the feedback is typically good information that can help us as third graders and as a third grade teacher become an even better writer. So think back to the beginning of this unit. We brainstormed our ideas, right? Then we came up with the emotions of different things. And then last week, I think it was last week, we started writing our personal narrative. Okay, and that's the draft that you have in your notebook right now. Okay, so what I'm going to have you look at first, and you'll even cut it out, and then it's going to get glued into the resources. So back at the beginning of your notebook, in the resources tab, you're gonna go to the next blank page in there. So right here, I don't think I have all of my papers in here yet. It's gonna go beside your seed story page. So since I don't have mine in my notebook yet, it's gonna go, for those of you at home, it's gonna go right beside that seed story page. Thank you, Lucas. Okay, and then what we're gonna do first in here, friends, is we're gonna go through the rubric so that they aren't at home waiting for us to cut it out and glue it in. We're gonna look through the rubric first. And then after we've done that, we'll glue it in. Cut it out and glue it in, I should say. Now, a rubric is how you are going to be graded or scored on your writing. This is specifically for a personal narrative story. Look at all these different categories going down this left-hand side. Do you see those? The first category is a small moment narrative. Remember how we went from our watermelon idea to the slice to the seed? I'm going to be looking to make sure that your personal narrative is really just about that one small moment in time. You can either get 2 points for that if it is narrowed down to that one small moment in time. You might get 1 point. If you wrote a personal narrative, but it's not narrowed down to that seed, that small moment, or if you didn't even write a personal narrative at all, your story is not about you or something that happened to you or that you did, you wouldn't get any points. But I know everybody's story is about them, about something that you did or happened to you. So you'll at least get the 1 or the 2 points. Okay, then if you go to the next category, it is lead. We haven't worked on this yet. This is something that we're going to continue to work on. So the lead is what you talk about at the very beginning of your writing that really gets your reader's attention, making them want to read the rest of your story. Okay, so if you have an interesting lead and it grabs your reader's attention, you'll score 2 points. Now, if you wrote a lead, but it's not one that really, when I was grading it, I was like, this might be an okay story, you'll probably just get a point. If you do not even try to include a lead in your story, you'll get 0 points. All right, paragraphs. This one's tricky. Says for 2 points, divided the text into paragraphs to show when time passed, the topic changed, or different characters spoke. So remember, paragraphs start on a new line and they're indented. Remember, indented means they're pushed in. We'll spend more time reviewing about paragraphs as well. Okay, so if you did all of those things, you'll get the 2 points. If you did divide your text into paragraphs, but you made some errors about where they needed to be divided, like if you at least tried to make those divisions in there for your paragraphs, you'll get 1 point. But if you just leave it like it exactly the way it is in your draft right now, you'll get 0 points for paragraphs. Because right now, I bet you all wrote it as one long paragraph. Am I right? Okay. Transitions is another thing that we'll be working on. I don't know, I would guess that you worked on some of those in 2nd grade, but we'll spend time doing that. If you included sufficient transitions, that means did you use them correctly? Because there's going to be different words that we talk about that work better in different places for transition words. Okay, so if I were going to say, this would be an example of a transition. Meanwhile, while Grandma and I were at the beach, what would my transition word have been in that sentence? Meanwhile. Okay, now you have to know the correct transition words to use though, because if it doesn't make sense, it's going to sound weird in your story. So we'll talk about that. Another thing we're going to be talking about is dialogue. What is dialogue? What am I doing right now to all of you?
Talking.
That's what dialogue is. Dialogue then is people talking back and forth. So if people are talking in a story, what do you notice those things around what they say? What are those called? Quotation marks. So we're going to be working on using quotation marks correctly and punctuating their dialogue correctly. Details. That's just making sure that as I'm reading through your story, I can picture what's happening in my mind. Do you ever read a book that doesn't have pictures in it, but you create that own picture in your mind as you're reading it of what's happening? Kind of like that mental movie that you're making in your mind of that story. Okay, that's what I need to be able to do if you have included lots of details. Word choice, using words that showed what was happening rather than just telling. So again, that goes along well with details. If you have a lot of details, I bet your word choice is pretty good because I'm making that picture in my mind. I'm visualizing what's happening in your story. We'll be working on the ending, making sure that our ending is interesting. Spelling. We'll be working on spelling also. That's something that you'll be graded on as you write your stories, okay? As well as punctuation. Did you use your periods correctly, or your question marks in the right spots, or exclamation marks when they needed to be used, or commas, things like that. All right, so lots of things that you will be graded on. Now, there will be times when we do some writing, I'm just gonna say, okay, I'm just looking for your small moment narrative. I'm looking for your paragraphs. There might just be certain things on here that I grade. But then there's gonna be other times where everything is graded on a piece of writing. Lots of things that I'll be looking for in your writing each time we do a personal narrative. This will be the rubric we use. Okay? Question?
How do you how do you know that you got 2 points? How do you know?
I'll circle it. I'll give you a full sheet like this one when I actually grade your writing, and I'll circle where you were at on this bigger sheet. So then you know. And I'll put how many points you got, because the most points you can get, each one of these is worth 2 points. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's worth a total of 20 points. So if you get 20 out of 20, you get a 100. If you get 19 out of 20, it would be a 95. If you get 18 out of 20, that's a 90%. All of those are A's. Once you get down into the 80%, those are B's. 70% are C's. 60% are D's. 50% and lower are F's. But that means you got absolutely 0 points. Don't you think you can at least get some points? Absolutely. Any other questions about the rubric? We went over a lot of information, but each one of these parts we're going to be breaking down and helping us understand it more as we're writing. Okay? All right, so here's what you're going to do. You're going to cut this out and glue it into the next page in your resources section.